Okay, let's move on to the rugby results from the weekend. Wins for the Stormers, the Bulls, only just. The Kings being a lot more competitive, but they unfortunately then went down again quite heavily. The Cheetahs went down. What stood out for you from this weekend's results?
Yeah, not a great weekend again, unfortunately, for South African teams. And like you said, starting with the Kings, they were far more competitive. The scoreline just ran away with them a little bit in the last sort of quarter of the match against the Hurricanes. But they're heading back now to South Africa for a massive match against the Sunwolves. I think that's probably the only match they can win this season. Same for the Sunwolves. It must be said that's probably the only match they could win. So really, toss of the coin who's going to win that game in PE this coming weekend. The Stormers and the Sharks, who went down narrowly to the Crusaders, playing a lot of defensive rugby. Unfortunately, it's not great to watch. It's you got the New Zealand, well, the Crusaders in against the Sharks did all the attacking, had all the possession, had all the territory, and the Sharks were only sort of kept in the game through their defense and a couple of mistakes by the Crusaders, which led to sort of runaway intercept tries by the Sharks. By 14 points there, and that's all. The only 14 points the Sharks actually got. And then if you were brave enough to stay up to almost midnight to watch the Stormers in Argentina against the Jaguars, again 13-8 final score, 1 try each, not a great game. Again, the Jaguars they dominated the possession, the territory, and then quite surprisingly that Nicolas Sanchez, who's normally a really good kicker, missed a couple of penalties conversion that would have given the home side the victory. So the Sharks and the Stormers still have a lot to work on, and they are still the best two South African teams, probably up there with the Lions who had a bye this weekend. So it's not looking fantastic for a South African point of view. The whole tournament structure this year does sort of favour the South African teams that 2 will at least get through, maybe 3 to the quarterfinals. So forget how bad they're actually playing. They will still have some representation in the quarterfinals, but they'll certainly have to improve their game. All rules that have sort of been brought into rugby in the last couple of years have been to favour the attacking side, and it still seems that somehow some teams, and unfortunately all the South African teams, seem to get away with defending and still being competitive, which I don't think World Rugby really wanted to be the case, but it just sort of happened that way, that you can attack and attack and attack, and then the refs seem to favour the defending team, and then there's no daylight at the breakdown penalty to the defending team after 15, 20 phases. And I think everyone wants to see the teams that are willing to attack and throw the ball around rather than the teams that just defend all day. It's not that exciting. Crowds are dwindling, and I think something really has to be done to to favour the attacking team more so. It seems like refs and TMOs are looking for reasons not to award tries rather than to award tries and put points on the board. So a bit of a mixed bag from South African teams this weekend. Unfortunately, we 5 weeks into the tournament. Still a long way to go. Anything can happen. Some big games coming up, local derbies this weekend. So it should be interesting. But from a South African point of view, not the best weekend.
Well, of course, the Stormers then leapfrogging the Sharks, the only team that they have actually lost to this season. So they're on top of the South African conference. Are there any teams which you feel again are standing head and shoulders above the rest? I mean, the Chiefs, the Brumbies, possibly.
Highlanders. Ahead of the season, I picked the Brumbies to actually win this whole tournament. I was sort of looking at this complicated system, the way the tournament's going to work, and I thought it just favoured the Brumbies. And they even though they lost to the Stormers, they're still right up there, and they're guaranteed pretty much a home quarterfinal, and they'll be really tough to beat in Canberra. But worryingly for I think everyone else in the tournament, the New Zealand teams this weekend had a really good weekend. The Blues had a bye, so the other 4 teams all won, and crucially the Crusaders won in Durban. But the Hurricanes, Highlanders, and who was the other team? The Chiefs. Really recorded big victories, and crucially again they seem to score tries at will. We talked earlier about obviously attacking, and that's what you get from New Zealand teams. They're scoring 7, 8, 9 tries in each match. They're really putting away the sides, and they've got 4 teams now in the top 5 in the Australasian group. And how this tournament works is 5 teams will make it to the quarters from the Australasian group and 3 teams from the Africa group. So it looks like we could have 4 out of the 5 being New Zealand teams, which if you think in the past when 6 teams made it through to the playoffs, it was pretty much 2 from South Africa, 2 Australia, 2 New Zealand. Now 8 teams in the quarters, but as many as 4 teams look like they could be New Zealanders. So that's a bit worrying for the rest of the world. Obviously we're not in a Rugby World Cup year or anything like that, but it seems like there's no hangover from last year's Rugby World Cup for the New Zealand teams. They've lost a lot of players they've rested, like Sunnyville Williams, Liam Messam. Those sort of players are only focusing on the 7s for the Olympics this year, but they still unearthed these really good players, and they seem like they can certainly keep up their winning record and just more depth for New Zealand. No Richie McCaw, no Dan Carter, no Ma'an Nonu, no Conrad Smith, but they're not sort of missed. These teams sort of found replacements, and they're all playing really well. So a bit ominous for the rest of the world that 4 years out from a World Cup, they're unearthing new talent that will be ready for 2019 in Japan. So a little bit worrying, but the New Zealand teams and the Brumbies, I think for me at the moment, are the sort of teams to watch for, as title contenders.